Hey guys, what's happening? It's Friday, August the 21st, and apparently it's yet another video making kind of day. This one is going to be about a project that I just finished. Some of you are probably aware, maybe all of you are aware, that last Saturday, August the 15th, was the anniversary of VJ Day, Victory over Japan, which of course represents the last day of combat with Japan in the Pacific during World War II. And to commemorate that event, Paul Bretland over at ISM was cool enough to put on another one of his 48-hour build challenges. I say challenges, it's not like there's any prizes, Paul. Uh, but it is a challenge. I mean, even given my own physical challenges, it's tough to build a decent kit in 48 hours under any circumstances, and that's why I've done two of these now, just purely as a way to test myself and to see what I can learn. I think it's been a worthwhile experience. If you follow my videos, you know that for the last one, which was the Battle of Britain 48-hour challenge, I did the Italeri 48th scale Hawker Hurricane. And I finished in 48 hours, 47 hours, 55 minutes, minus an antenna wire. And it was an ass whipping. I thought, hey, this will be a simple kit. And that was true. It was a good strategy from that standpoint, but it had a lot of fit issues, and I ended up spending way more time wrestling with those than I wanted to, given that I was on a deadline. So this time around, I thought, okay, I've learned my lesson. I went completely the opposite direction, and I elected to build the Tamiya 148th a6m3 0, which is a fantastic kit. If I remember right, it cost me about $40, maybe $50, and I thought that would be the right thing to do, because obviously with the Tamiya kit you have very little to fear in terms of fit issues. And overall, that largely proved to be true. But before I talk too much about that, let's take a look at what I was able to do with it.
Where were you when I was lonesome, locked away with freezing cold? Someone flying only stolen. I can't tell this night's so old. I don't wanna swim.
Okay, so there it is. Now, what did I learn and what do I think of the kit? Oh, first of all, I guess I should say right up front that I did not finish in 48 hours. Not even close, in fact. And I knew about halfway through that was going to be the case. So what happened? Well, basically, I kind of fell in love with it. The truth is that I pick the kit and the aircraft for these 48-hour builds kind of based on how much I love a particular subject. Not a huge fan of the Hurricane, and I've never built a Japanese plane before, never really have had a huge interest in them, and so I thought, hey, this is a good way to add an iconic aircraft to my collection without spending a whole lot of time on it. And I still think that was a reasonable way to look at it, but what I didn't expect is that I was just going to end up falling in love with the kit itself and a little bit with the subject. I did do some research beforehand to figure out what colors I should use, and that's one thing I learned, is that there's more debate on the actual colors of Japanese aircraft than there are about pretty much anything else I've found. So that can be a little bit frustrating, but I found a pretty good resource called jplanes.com, and there's some actual credible research there that that I would recommend anybody use if they are wondering themselves what colors to use for a Japanese aircraft. But at any rate, as far as the kit goes, my first Tamiya 48th kit was the Mark I Spitfire, and that thing has a couple of sprues and a total of about 60 parts. And for some reason, I thought that was representative of all Tamiya 148th aircraft. And so I got my first sort of dose of reality when I built the Tamiya 148th ME262, and it was much more complicated. Again, I thought, okay, maybe this one will be similar to the Spitfire. Not true at all. This kit was tooled, I believe, in 2010. I don't have an exact part count, but just to give you a frame of reference, if I remember correctly, the cockpit on the Italeri Hurricane has like 8 or 10 pieces. The cockpit on this thing, and I'll open it up here so you can maybe see it a little bit better, has, I think, 27 pieces. And they are exquisitely detailed. And that's when the love affair always starts with me. I really enjoy cockpits. I can't resist putting all of the effort that I can into them. And this one, I really was happy with the way it turned out. In spite of the fact that after I had about half of it assembled and had painted that whole chunk with some nice green paint, I discovered that I had left off the left-hand side console piece. And then I discovered that the reason was because it was missing. I couldn't find it anywhere. And in a year of model making, that was the first time that I had a part go permanently MIA. And at that point, I still thought that I was going to make the 48-hour thing, and so I spent an hour or two scratch building that console. Fortunately, it's a fairly simple shape. You're not going to be able to see it in there very well, which is probably a good thing because it doesn't look horrible, but it doesn't look all that great either. It looks the part from, the distance that it'll usually be seen at. So the punchline to that story is that yesterday, when I was doing some finishing work or some touch-up work, I picked up the bottom half of the box from its spot about 2 feet away on my workbench, and guess what I found in that box? So I guess that's another lesson. Search everywhere, especially places you don't think that your missing part might actually be located. Anyhow, speaking of the cockpit, one thing that I was pretty happy with is the only aftermarket bit that I bought for this, and hopefully you can see those in there, is the Edward seat belts. And I basically bought those just so that I would have something quick and easy to use as seat belts, fitting in with the 48-hour theme. And so I bought their little IJN seatbelt collection, and that's all it is on the card or the fret. And it's okay. I thought that they looked pretty good, but based on the instructions, the one that they called out for this aircraft didn't really make sense. So I just kind of went with what looked like I had seen in photographs, and they went on painlessly, and pretty happy with that. The other Edward thing I bought that I was not happy with, and I have real beef with Edward about, was the canopy mask. Now, I've experienced some Edward stuff that didn't fit very well before, in the form of photo etch parts that were apparently made for some other kit. But their masks have always been pretty good to me, and so I was disappointed to find that a number of panels, specifically the two panels here and here on both sides of the windscreen, and about half of the panels on the center section of the canopy, were oversized. And we're talking by 5/1000ths of an inch, but that's enough to make the canopy frame not look right. And so what I ended up having to do was section those panels into pieces and put them back on there in a way that took care of that. And it was a real hassle. I spent probably 2 hours overall dealing with that. And so yeah, a little annoyed with Edward on that front. But hey, that's part of scale modeling, and it is most definitely a first world problem. As far as fit issues go, my God, this thing is an amazing kit. I honestly wish I could give it a perfect score because it really is so good. But there were actually two fit issues, and they were a little bit disappointing. One was the wingtip landing lights. I worked it out, and they look fine, but they did not actually fit very well. They went in fine, but they weren't the right thickness. And it was a little disappointing that they didn't have a locating pin. Those things are always a hassle to get glued in the right place, and not having a locating pin does not help things. The other spot that I had an issue was right here. This piece right here has to fit. Is supposed to fit flush with the back of the engine cowling, and on one side, this side right here, it was sticking up probably 50/1000ths, while the other side was flush, and everything else was flush. Everything else was flush, so there wasn't a misalignment someplace. There was just a little bit of warpage that caused this section right around this exhaust tip to not sit down as far as it should. And I ended up having to hold it down and put some super glue and some accelerator on it. And so I took care of it, and it's fine, but it's still worth mentioning because I felt like it was significant. But those were literally the only two fit issues that I had on the entire kit. Everything else just went together beautifully, and I gotta say, I'm just always so impressed with Tamiya. I mean, if you want to know why the Japanese are so good at the electronics and automotive industries, just build a Tamiya kit. I mean, the engineering is simply fantastic. It's like they actually thought the whole process through and considered how parts would go together and how they would be joined using Tamiya extra thin, and sometimes even what painting sequence you might go in. I mean, what a concept, right? That you might actually look at this from an actual model making standpoint, as opposed to just, how to get everything inside of the amount of space you have in the tool. So, I totally get why some guys are always on about how good Tamiya is, because they deserve it. And, you can call me a Tamiya snob too if you want to. I don't care, because I'll be happily building away at kits that fit well and are engineered well, while you guys are struggling with whatever else. So anyway, enough of that. I don't think there's really a whole lot more to say about this. I'm really glad that I decided to go ahead and just write it off as a 48-hour build and take the 4 extra days that were required to finish it up, because I really like the way it turned out. Not perfect, they never are, but particularly in terms of weathering, I feel pretty good about this one. I like the way it came out. I used one thing that I did that's worth mentioning, I think, is I don't particularly care for hard black panel lines. To me, that's not realistic, even though it does look pretty cool. And what I wanted was a panel line wash that would be a derivative of the actual paint color, but slightly darker. And so, since this is a fairly just kind of a warm gray color, I used some UMP dark dirt, light dirt, and concrete to come up with a wash that basically did that. And it took me 2 or 3 tries to get the color where I wanted it, but that's no big deal because you put it on, and if it's not right, I just did a little test section, and if it wasn't right, I just washed it off and, added a little more of whatever I felt like I needed and tested it again. And I feel overall like that worked out really well, and I've even hit Paul up about adding some other colors to their line of washes because, it'd be great to have something green in there in case you were doing, if you did this plane in a green color scheme or doing something like my B25 in olive drab. I think that would be sweet to be able to make a dark green water-based clay wash for the panel lines. So I think it worked out pretty good. I also did something a little different on the exhaust stains, something that I've been trying to learn and have been frustrated with, and that I actually feel pretty good about on this one, is I airbrushed the exhaust stains on this one. And I actually did that with the leftovers of my black-brown oil wash that I had used for some staining. And it worked surprisingly well. And so I'm going to continue on that path to try and build my exhaust stain airbrushing skills, because I really feel like that's the goal. That's what produces the best results, and definitely want to get to where I can do those. So at any rate, there you have it. That's the summary of what I did and what I learned. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed that sort of quick look at my efforts on the Tamiya 148th AM60. I know I've said it several times, over the last few minutes, but if you're looking for a zero and you just want a really good, fun kit to build, I totally recommend this one. I think it's a fantastic kit. I'm just astounded at the crispness and the level of detail that these guys consistently produce on their sprues, and just can't say enough about how much I enjoy it. Again, if you're looking for a fun kit, that's definitely one to add to your list. All right, guys, if you're still watching, as always, I appreciate it. Much love.